Good. Okay, welcome to Ceremony is Everything, where we talk to people we admire and friends of triumph and disaster. So today we're talking to a super talented athlete, a guy who's been described as having a huge engine. He's a qualified mechanical engineer, worked at Fisher & Paykel, delved into aeronautics. He's won the Taupo Half Ironman, the Tauranga Half Ironman, Challenge Wanaka Ironman, as well as many other endurance events. He's a professional DJ, or he's been a professional DJ, and he's definitely a guy to see if you have any issues with your mountain bike. Welcome, Jack Moody.
Yeah, thanks for having me along. Super excited to get in here and chat all things sport and what I get up to on a daily basis.
What you get up to on a daily basis, exactly. Well, that's what we're all about. We call it Ceremony is Everything. Does that saying mean anything to you?
It does, yeah. I mean, there's so many little rituals that go into my day. Like, it's such a routine, and you take the little wins every day, and that's what builds up to... We only get to race maybe 10 times a year. The demand is so big on the body. There's only so much you can do. So the training has to be a massive proponent of it, and everything else that goes around it. And so it's really nice to align with this idea of ceremony is everything, because I like the little bits in the day that all build up to one big key goal for me in the sport. There's no hero sessions, there's no miracle cure, it's just consistency.
Yep. That's true of everything, right? There's no silver bullet. It's about building on and making small gradual improvements. It's so great when this is personal for me in building a business, but like I saw a great chart somewhere on Facebook or something, and it was like, here's where you are and here's the goal, and it's like this linear line, and then there's reality, which is sort of like it's just like this sort of like thing, but eventually you hit the goal, if you stick at it.
Oh, of course. I mean, every part of life, there's a massive roller coaster, right? We only have to look where we got locked up for 2 years, which seems incredible to even fathom that was possible. And for my own sport, it was a terrible loss for racing, but it was so minor in the overall picture of things, because there was a lot of other wins where I actually just got to knuckle down and train for 2 years, and it kind of reset my whole outlook on not only the sport, but what I was doing and what I wanted to achieve out of the sport as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like COVID did it. It was a reset for everybody, but you forget there's people who probably were at the end of their career who, for COVID, it ended their career. For someone like yourself, it's probably helped. It's helped consolidate and build and allow you to maybe refocus and re-go.
Yeah, it definitely kind of lit the fire. And yeah, it was terrible for some people. It was kind of a spell at the end of the career, because they lost 2 pretty valuable years of where they would have done their swan song. And for others, we look at the sport, there's this 2-year gap where everyone just trained the house down, and the sport exploded on the way out. The times just got faster and faster, and whatever you thought you could do time-wise for a race prior to COVID, like you had to turn up and bring your A game to break that course record the next time you turn up to race, because everyone was just so much better. Wow,
that's interesting. Listen, we've jumped straight in, but for those who don't know who Jack Moody is, tell us a little bit about yourself and how we've arrived here.
Yeah. So I mean, I could go back to day naught, but so I was born and raised in Auckland. Sort of lived here most of my life, bar 4 years down in Christchurch, studying engineering down that way, and then migrated back up to start work as an engineer at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare for a few years, and that's where I found triathlon probably properly, I should say. I was never in the top football team, hockey team, can't play cricket, useless at tennis, so better off just doing endurance sport. And luckily my bike handling skills are there or there enough to be in a solid TT position. And so I started doing triathlon while I was at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, and I got bit by the bug massively. And I had really positive influences around me from people that had done it before, teachers at school, and then my own friend group as well that were probably far more talented than myself. I was maybe just a little bit grittier than them, and just enjoyed the whole process that was involved in the triathlon. I've always kind of told myself, like, for me, it's not really about the racing. I actually just love the training. Like, to now build a job and a career out where I get to go and do what I love every day, it's actually almost a shame that I've got to go and do the racing, because I'd be happy to just train another day.
I heard you say a really interesting thing, which was something along the lines of, if you lose a race and let that sort of, be the outcome. You're in the sport for the wrong reasons. What does that mean to you? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to dwell on the negative results, and for us, only one person wins the race. It's not a team of 11 or whatever to win. So more often than not, you lose it. You only get so many wins in your career, and if you come go onto the sidelines and sulk, you're in it for the wrong. It's okay, sweet. He beat me by X amount. What did I do wrong? What can I do better? And for me, that's massive fuel. I remember last year I lost a tower and a half, and I've been on the podium there, I think 6 times. So it's year after year, I was close, but just never enough to get onto that top step. And then this year was the year I finally won it, and it was a sprint finish. So it was a pretty special way to win the race. And it was finally, after all these years of back to the drawing board, or okay, I need to improve my swim, or I need to improve my bike, or I need to do this, that, and just dialing in these sort of incremental changes, and sort of building this routine, I suppose, finally got the win. And that's this massive sense of relief.
Yeah.
And that's happened in a few different races that I've lined up for New Zealand. Now it's okay, how do I defend it?
Yes. Yeah. The 10 seconds, right? 70 kilometers and then finish 10 seconds difference. Is that right?
Yeah. It's funny, because we go so fast now, and over 3.5 hours of racing, which it doesn't seem like that amount or that long to be out there, but believe me, when you go hammer and tongs for that long, you want that finish line to come as soon as possible. 10 seconds is nothing over that sort of distance of race.
And so what does it mean, being in it for the right reasons then? What is that?
For me, there's a few different sort of facets to it. I really enjoy the community and the sport. Having played around doing a bit of cycling at school and running and triathlon now, I probably found that's the healthiest community that I'd like to be involved in. And the nice thing about the sport is, just because we're professionals, we actually still interact a lot with the age groupers, with amateurs, and that's got a really nice feel to it. And there's only so many pros in New Zealand. We can't all be a professional athlete. And so you often actually do a lot of training with the amateurs. And you learn a lot as they learn from you, and it goes both ways. So I like that. And then for me, there's only so long I can sit at a desk. And so to be able to build a career pathway where I can get outside and do what I enjoy every day and share that.
I'd be pretty interested to know what sort of masochists are doing this as an amateur and part-time sort of training routine.
Yeah, I wasn't an amateur for an awful amount of time, but it's pretty demanding, and it's no different. I've got so much respect for some of the amateurs that I do know that are holding it down out there, probably training between 15 and 20 hours a week, working, anywhere between 35, 40, maybe more, and got kids and a family. You're getting pulled in 400 different directions, let alone trying to get to a start line healthy.
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing about the sport, is everyone's got their own journey to that start line, and everyone's got their own story to tell. And it's really nice after that race when you do interact with everyone and within the different clubs that are formed, or the coaching groups. You share the war stories like any sport afterwards, and that's quite special.
So give us a little taste. What's your average training week? What's it look like?
Gosh, we'll be here all week at this point. So we're training quite heavily at the moment. I'm getting ready to do a full distance triathlon, an Ironman racing career at the beginning of June. So it's quite volume intensive. So kind of getting closer to that 30-hour mark of training. And so at the moment, we're trying to swim 6 times a week, and we'll cut that any way we want. It's just trying to get that consistency of swimming. Each of those swims are about 4 kilometres. And often 1 or 2 of them are an open water swim at Takapuna. That's kind of become this byproduct of COVID, of there was no pools open, and we found this massive outlet and relief of actually swimming in the open water there. Other than that, probably running about 5 hours or 70 to 80 kilometres a week, say, of running, and then I'm probably on the bike for about 15 hours. And much to a lot of people here's disgust, probably, as a lot of that's indoors. So I probably am doing winter maybe 90% indoors, and summer the weather's been really nice and sealed at the moment, shiny new bikes definitely help get me out the door a little bit more, as it should. But yeah, maybe 60% indoors over summer. So that all gets changed around. Like yesterday, for instance, was a 5-hour ride and a 45 odd minute run off the bike. And then today, for instance, I was up at the crack of dawn to go swimming and then back for a 90-minute run, off to the gym for a bit. You probably can't tell. And then, yeah, we'll kind of rinse and repeat tomorrow.
I mean, it sounds pretty full on, if I'm honest. The indoors biking, is that a personal choice, or is that sort of or is there a safety issue because you're not risking so much being out, or what's the...
Yeah, a lot of it is, well, it's a combination of a safety choice for me. The power that we generate on the bike now, this level for what I need to do when it comes to race day, is pretty high, and what that means is we're going fast.
Yeah.
And so we're racing some, like in Tauranga, for instance, about 45 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
There's only so many roads in Auckland that you want to be on a bike doing 45 kilometres an hour consistently, especially in the morning traffic. So it's kind of a safer, more sensible option often for me to be indoors. When I go abroad training and racing, then kind of necessitates being outside, and outside of Auckland there's some great opportunity to ride hard outside, and then same with the weather. It's partly I'm soft and partly it's actually just safer to be on a bike on the trainer when it's soaking wet.
Last chat we had was with a PT called Marwan Celerio, and he was a fantastic guy, but he talked about this range of fitness or health as a goal, and talked about people living at suboptimal or to optimal. But what was really interesting, he sort of spoke about optimal being elite athlete sort of level, and suboptimal obviously. And he said everyone's got to find their gauge or where they fit on that spectrum. But I guess the other thing was that he said is the further you move towards optimal, the larger the trade-offs you have to make to get there. You are at optimal. I mean, 30 hours a week training is, in anyone's language, that's intense. What are the trade-offs you're making to get there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been this slow progression now to build to this. Like in the last couple of years, I was still working. The big trade-off I had to do for a long time was work 6 days a week and create a part-time working schedule that would accommodate me being able to train in the morning and then work in the afternoons. So not a traditional working week, and not the healthiest for a relationship at home, as you can imagine, sort of train all morning, head to work in the afternoon. And so this year I've been really fortunate to get a bit more support to allow me to sort of back that down to 2 days of work a week and train a bit more. But the other facet of that is social life definitely will take a hit, and it's now nice and trying to sort of build that back up. And I think being at a school like Auckland Grammar, coming from a school like Auckland Grammar, friendships are actually really important, and they kind of become lifelong friends that you make out of sport more than what your classmates for maths or whatever. It's always your sports friends that you seem to gravitate back to. So it's nice to sort of invest a bit more time in that now that I'm not having to work as much. But yeah, don't get me wrong, it's a busy schedule. Still get to bed early, but the days are long for sure.
You are upbeat, sort of buoyant guy. Like every time you bounce in here, you're like, light on your feet and light of mood. But with that sort of training, I mean, you must go both in races, but also in the training. You must go to some pretty dark places. Yeah,
I mean, I actually got asked this in an interview the year I won Taupo 70.3. Someone said, what do you do when you get in the pain cave? And I was like, I actually really enjoy it. I quite like getting tucked up in the corner of the pain cave and having been, kicked and prodded. It's almost like, open a book and just settle in for the ride. I think in my first ever half Ironman, it was just about lights out. Like, I didn't know much about the sport, and it's kind of sickening to think. I was like, I want to get back to that. Like, that's obviously as hard at the time that I could go. I was right on the limit, and now I've trained more. I was like, where's that limit? And you're always trying to find, in anything you do, where's that limit, right? So I got very close in Swansea last year, where it all kind of went tits up a few hundred from the line, and so I kind of recalibrated a few things to then go, okay, that's the next limit, this is how we do. So it's kind of pushing the envelope each time to see how far we can take the body and where success comes from that.
And so you call it the pain cave, but that's when, in any given moment in the race, that's the point where it's hurting too much and you want to pull back or you've got a little bit more left in the tank. What is the pain cave? Tell us.
Well, I mean,
what's
it's
your
such
definition?
It's a long day, and it's trying to stay positive, right? Mindset is probably more important than anything else out there, and that gun goes off, and it's usually sun's just rising, water might be cold or something, and anywhere between 10 and 60 guys are all lining up, and they're all going to start smacking each other as we start swimming. And so it's trying to create that positivity while you're obviously hurting, because you're going to be swimming as hard as you possibly can at this point. And then it will settle, and you kind of come out of that pain cave. But there's going to be moments all day where it's really going to start hurting, and it's trying to create that mind shift of, either I enjoy this is what I came for, how much do I want this, and what can I do to get myself out of this position without having to back off? Like, how much do I really want this?
How often do you have to ask that in the race?
More often than I'd like.
I mean, do you, because we've all, any athlete has been there and probably given up at certain times, and just, I think the closest thing I can probably feel to an endurance thing is, just a simple beep test that we used to do. And you'd always push yourself as hard as you can, but then you'd get to a certain level and you just wouldn't make the turn and you'd give up. And then 30 seconds later you'd be like, why didn't I just hold on a little bit longer? But that's a 15-minute beep test or whatever. Yours is a 3-hour race with people breathing down your neck.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm probably in a, not going to say a privileged position, but it's nice that I've come from running. So I kind of always have this mindset that my day's only getting better. So I'm often a little bit back on the swim, and that gap's getting smaller, and same with on the bike. But when it's time to hit the ground and start running, it's like, yeah, sweet, it's time to go to work.
Yeah.
So it actually doesn't matter. It's like the longer the runway we're on, and so there's kind of always this carrot that you're chipping away at of like, the run will come, and then you're like, okay, how much can we really do?
Yeah.
And I think I'm glad I'm a runner and not a swimmer. Otherwise, the day would be just this downhill sort of slide.
That's really interesting, though. Is there within the sport, would most people be runners or cyclists? Is it an even split, or what do you think It's
a mixed bag for sure. Yeah. Everyone's come from their own backgrounds, and some are really strong across the board. Which is fantastic, and then others might be an Uber cyclist, and they've just got to go as hammer and tongs on the bike, and then hang on for dear life on the run, and you're just chasing. And same with the swim, and so there's so many different elements to it, and that's actually a really cool thing about the sport is you're training across 3 different disciplines. And there's a trade-off. Trying to be an all-rounder is actually pretty difficult.
I watched this wonderful clip of Kathy Freeman, the Aussie 400 metre runner, been asked to narrate her Sydney Olympic final in the 400 metres, and she'd come back and she was sitting there on live TV talking people through the race and sort of at different stages, and she said this really interesting thing as she was coming around the bend with 150 to go. She said something like she was waiting for someone to throw it down, or some of the other girls in the race to throw it down, and no one did, and she said she realised no one wanted to win it, so she blitzed them. And it was like this, you sort of like, as an athlete, have you experienced, do you know what she's talking about? That idea that there's a certain point where you just know you're the only one who wants this, or can win this?
I haven't had it as much in triathlon, but I've been lucky to have some success in that sort of half marathon space in New Zealand, having won Queenstown half marathon and Hawke's Bay a couple times as well. And you take off at the start, and like my girlfriend always asked me before the race, because we're in these fields or these paddocks often, for Hawke's Bay or Queenstown, and there might be 10,000 people in the field, and she goes, "Oh, Jack, do you see any competition?" Or he looks fast, or he looks, and you go, "Yeah." And she's like, "How?" And then I go and win, and she goes, "How did you know you were going to win?" And I was like, "Well, I knew after 200 meters, no one wanted it more. You've gone out hard, and if no one goes with you, or if they do, and you can hear them breathing like they're smoked a pack of cigarettes after 200 meters, you kind of know you've got it. Which, I mean, that's not a cocky thing to say. It's just like when you amp yourself up that much and you want something.
Yeah. No, it doesn't sound cocky. And it doesn't sound cocky when Kathy Freeman said it. It's that pure athlete ambition of you've done everything and you're in your
peak shape.
Peak
you know
shape, you
that
know.
you're fit. Yep.
You sense what the people around you are where they're at, right? It's like and you just know, right?
Yeah, we track all our training. Like everything's dictated to me by a coach, and every little metric is tried to be measured in some aspect. And it's hard to measure everything. Like emotional state is something you just can't quantify. That has a massive effect on sport as a whole. But when you go into these races and you get this sort of killer mindset and the training's been done, all of a sudden you kind of realise within that first kilometre, you're almost unstoppable. And just to be able to go out there and enjoy running hard is pretty magical.
You're talking about mindset, or you touched on it there. I mean, it appears to us in here that you're right on top of your mindset. But has it always been that way, or is that something you know, in cricket we always talked about being in form, and form was this magical, mythical sort of space that you sort of slipped into, and then when you're in there, it was like being inside the hamster wheel. But slipping out of it, all of a sudden it seemed impossible to find again. Is that sort of similar in terms of the mental space that you have to get into, or have you got your own routine or rhythm to get back there?
For me, it's kind of just been this long grind. Like I wasn't successful. I'm not going to say unsuccessful, but I just wasn't an elite athlete at school. I was one of the backpackers. I mean, we do this famous run where we at school, one of your first runs at grammar, where you run up what's called the bitch. It's this run from the bottom of the tennis, so the tennis grounds, up the hill in the domain up to the duck pond, and then they usually older boys will throw all the third formers in the duck pond. So you got to hope you've got a bit of energy left at the top of the hill. But I'll be the last runner up. I was the slowest runner of all the third formers up the hill. And it's like year on year, you get a bit faster and stronger. And it's this mindset for me, I think, where you're happy to grind, happy to work hard. It's like, yes, there is obviously some natural talent. Like I would be first to admit I was a late bloomer to puberty. I probably put on about 10 kilos when by the time I finished school, and I grew a foot. I don't think I had to shave until I was about halfway through university. I was thinking about it today when I was coming in. I was like, I don't think I actually had to pick up a razor unless it was to go home. And
here it was thinking it was our shave cream made you look so baby-faced.
It was actually yesterday, but that's a different story. And so it was just the ability to grind, and like even when I first started in the sport of triathlon, I was the slowest swimmer, and I quickly ascended into the professional scene purely on the basis that I was one of the fastest runners at the time in the sport, but I was a rubbish swimmer. So I was eligible to be in this pro race, but I was starting from so far back. So if you haven't got this mindset to be able to grind and be positive or optimistic about how your day's going to unfold, it's not the sport for you.
So Jack, one of the things we always talk about is ritual and preparation. Do you have any pre-match sort of rituals or preparations that you sort of are religious about?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to start laughing now in terms of I am probably the biggest creature of habit you'll meet. Maybe it's the monotony of what I do as a job. But I've probably, I don't know for how many years now, had the same breakfast. And that includes race day. Muesli, a bit of Greek yogurt, a banana, probably a Barocca as well before I have my coffee. Someone always says, oh, why do you have Barocca? And I say, it's easier than having an orange juice first thing. So maybe it's a bit healthier. And then lunch is the same, even as, eggs and a bagel or something. So for me, nothing really changes on race day in terms of that mental state or the routine I go through come race day. It's the same as every other day, which is quite nice. I like the idea of it's another opportunity to perform, obviously, to turn up on race day, but I don't need to change, and I don't need to turn up with a magic bullet come race day. You've done all the prep, and it's nice to just be settled in that morning. And the only downside is I often don't have my coffee machine with me, so it's sort of a dirty instant before we head down to the start line at the crack of dawn. And then, night before, we try and keep it pretty casual in terms of like food options. That's probably what most athletes kind of think about around that race time, and maybe because we're always hungry, is like what are we going to eat beforehand, and what are we going to before the night before or the morning of, and a lot of your day and stuff is planned out around that. The only thing I probably in a ritual sense from a training or a racing perspective that I often do is I'll often go for a little shakeout jog the night before a race and sort of just do a few strides where I build up to top speed, as if it was a sprint finish, which I never thought I'd have to have, and now I've had 2 in one summer, so luckily I've been doing those all these years before a race. And that's, trying to keep it as simple and relaxed as possible. Like we've played around with things in the past with like a body scan where you lie down and that sort of thing, but it hasn't felt necessary at this point. It's just trying to be as relaxed as possible.
Yeah, simplicity, right? It's with it, and when it works, don't change it, don't mess with it.
Yeah. Like we're in a sport where you're sort of controlling the controllables. Like all you're trying to do is get the best out of yourself. And it's so easy to get caught up on X, Y, and Z and what have they been doing for training, or what's this, or the results of that. It actually doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's like if you've done the work and you perform to what you know you're capable of, then the result will be the result. Because we are just little engines going as hard as we can for a few hours out there to see if we can win.
Little engines. I spoke to someone who's competed against you, and the guy's got a massive engine, can hurt himself hard, and is a great guy. What? What?
You must not know me that well.
So that was something I think when he said he competed against you, I think he started on the start line and then he drifted to the back. But I mean, the idea that other people are looking at you going, man, that guy can hurt himself hard. Does that give you sort of sense of pride, or what is that, or is that their perception? What?
They must have just seen a few ugly race photos. I think it's what springs to mind. It's not pretty. Yeah, like you do have to hurt yourself if you really want something. Like everyone would do it if it's easy, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason not everyone can be a professional at the top of any element of their game, and you've got to go through hard to make something easy. And once it gets easy, you start again, you start the cycle, and you make it hard again.
Yeah.
And so you're always trying to be better. I think at some point, like if I'm not trying to get better, then there's probably no point doing the sport. Like you should always be seeking for that next level.
You realise your mindset is not normal, right? So not everyone is doing what you just said.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got to come in with a sense of optimism in anything, right? I think, and a lot of people, I was laughing. I shouldn't keep referring back to my girlfriend, but she finally broke 2 hours for a half marathon, which for a lot of runners, that's a massive milestone. And she goes,
don't go say belittling 2 hours for a half marathon, mate.
Yeah, she goes, she was stoked, like it's a massive achievement. And then she goes, sweet, so I've done my PR, like personal record, I'm done now. And I said, but you could go faster. You go, no, I can't. And I said, but wouldn't you want to know what if you went 155? And it's like, I think you're right. People have different goals or different milestones, and it's kind of, mine is furthering in probably quite a linear, one directional, and other people go, okay, what's next? And they start looking further afield and widening out the old periscope.
That's interesting, and I've also heard you say that you don't believe you've got any natural talent and you're just a grinder. Clearly you do have natural talent, and there's a bit of self-effacing, and you may be labouring the point that you're a hard worker, but do you think, like, is that ability to go deep and sort of linear, is that part of your natural talent? Is that the part of the sort of superpower that do you think has got you this far in the sport? Or what would you put your finger on if you had to?
I think it probably is, and it probably comes from my parents, I'd say. They're not sportsmen, which a lot of people would be surprised. Like, mum's a yoga teacher and dad's he's a 5-classer. But knowing how hard they worked, watching us grow up, is probably, that's the skill set that we learned. Like, dad worked probably more often than not 7 days a week. He owned a small business in Mount Eden, trying to I'm one of 4 boys, and first of 4, so bit novel when the first kid goes, I'm dropping engineering and I'm off to be an athlete. And it's alarm bells in the household, especially when he's worked so hard to get us through and into school and in the grammar zone. So, and yeah, it's a small business owner, but watching how hard he worked, and if he wasn't working on the business, he was always working on the house and building the homes that we lived in to then turn into our next home, or, you know, when you start having more and more children, you need more bedrooms, don't you? And so they're finally at that stage in life where the bedroom numbers are coming back down and not up. But watching them, it's probably only in the last few years where I've started to probably admire that a bit more. I think as a belligerent sort of 18-year-old boy, you go, what do you know, mum and dad? But now you're like, oh, actually it's quite, you know, incredible what they were able to achieve with what they had, both sort of moving to New Zealand just before I was born. There's no real support network for them here.
And like you talked about like giving up engineering, which is obviously, you know, you've done well to get an engineering degree, you've worked hard, set yourself up, working for the best companies in the country, things are going pretty great, and then you've just pulled up stumps and gone, actually I'm going to go pro. Totally different tact. It's a little bit akin to being deciding to go and be an artist or an author and write books or something, isn't it? There's no guarantees, there's no money.
Totally.
What's like, was that just an internal drive you had to give that a go, or, you know, tell us about that decision-making process? I
mean, for me, I was at high school, I was able, so there's a World Secondary Schools cross country that happens every few years, and our school was the best school in the country, and so we got to go over, and I was they take 6 boys and 4 of them count to the team, and I was the 6th man chosen, the last cab off the ranks to go over to place in Slovakia. But as a result, because it was the World Secondary Schools, even though we were representing Auckland Grammar, we actually got to wear the New Zealand singlet. As a young kid, that's incredible to given the opportunity to wear a New Zealand singlet. And at that time, you're like, there's so much pride that comes with wearing your nation's country, especially a small nation like New Zealand. You're like, man, how special would it be to do this again? And to get that first glimmer of that when I started in triathlon, even as an age group in those first couple of races, I was like, this could be a pathway to representing New Zealand again, not only myself, but actually, you know, having the silk fern on you. And so I was like, let's see how this could go. And then I got a pretty healthy nudge in the right direction down at one of the Kohimarama swim series one night, after doing quite well at the Taupo 70.3 as an age group, and said, gentleman said, oh, so when are you going pro? It's something I hadn't even fathomed at the time, but I was like, it got me thinking. I was like, oh, well, what would it take for me to be a professional in the sport? And that kind of lit the fire of this pathway to where we are now, of sort of creating a sort of what we call it, work network, or creating some jobs, having to step away from full-time 9-to-5 job to create some other different avenues that may require less skills or different skills, so that I can actually train to a better potential and get the results that I'm after.
Yeah, it's a big move all the same though, isn't it? It's like burning your ship on the shore, you know, burning your ships when you land on the shore. It's like there's no going back, at least for a little while anyway.
Oh, I mean, I think, what am I out? Must be about 6 years out of engineering, and that pathway is looking more and more distant. So, I mean, the good news is my boss at the bike store, she's one of my best friends that I swim with. She's an engineer as well. She's just done 10 years owning a business and in the bicycle industry, and have just sold up, and she's making her way back to engineering. So it's good to know even after 10 years that you can do it. So just briefly tell us how DJing slipped into the whole scheme of things. Yeah, I mean, that was probably the most lucrative way of making money at university you could possibly imagine. One of the boys in the halls of residence was doing it, and I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And I've always been a massive fan of music as a whole anyway, and I think that's probably the byproduct of sport, and especially running, is that you do actually end up listening to a lot of music, and the longer you run, the more music you listen to. And so I ended up with some DJing equipment, and I started playing, and I was like, yeah, this is quite cool. And then got the opportunity to start playing a few gigs at the sort of local student bar, and then one thing escalated to another, and I was playing a few more, and then by the time I'd finished my university degree, I actually went and spent 3 months abroad over in France. It was a way to go into a ski season without having to pay to do a ski season. I ended up working nights in the hotel, DJing, and then skiing for the day. And I think that was, by the end of that, I was so drained mentally that I was ready to come back to sport pretty quickly because I could not face another night.
Another night of house music.
Yeah, totally.
French house music, wasn't it?
Exactly, and to this day I probably still only speak 10 words of French.
They often people talk about music and like sports people. They you will see rugby players or whoever with their their headphones on. But I think music does have a role with sports people just to sort of help people get into the zone. But like I read somewhere you're talking about the cadence of, was it drum and bass, and how that you try and train to a certain rhythm and a certain beat. Is that still something that is relevant?
It's not really. It just happens. Like that was a lot of the music I was listening to. Christchurch is a very drum and bass heavy area as a whole, and so when I moved back up to Auckland, that's what I'd be listening to on the old iPod with the corded headphones out the back pocket. And every sort of year or so, I'd lose one to the washing machine. I don't make them anymore, but it was, they say drum and bass is about 175, and a lot of people talk about this running cadence of 175. The only problem is, because I was sort of uncoached, my heart rate was about 175 each night, as well as I was running around Cornwall Park waiting for dinner to be ready at home. So it was pretty hard and fast hour of training after work, but it was it's a cool outlet. I think music has such an important part in everyone's life in their own way, and particularly when you're doing a sport where a lot of the hours I spend every week are by myself, do end up listening to a lot of music.
Yeah. So what about away from the game and away from the sport? You're going so hard, you're so intense, you're at that training at that optimal level, but what about counterbalance and sort of like self-investment? Is there any time for any of that, or is it just I'm all in at this point? Yeah,
there definitely is. 30 hours can get chewed up pretty quickly, but at the same time, my coach always laughs. I'm a big proponent of what I call mindlessness rather than mindfulness, and that's just being able to switch off and watch Netflix or jump on the iPad in the days that I'm not swimming early in a squad. Part of that ritual will just be getting up and having breakfast and sitting down on the couch and having a coffee and just chilling out for that first hour. And I'll often actually just get up earlier purely to enjoy that time in the morning. And that's nice as I build on this. When we first chatted about a month ago, coming in and going, hey, actually, I'm really invested. I want to take better care of my own skin so I don't look like this wrinkly old man by the time I hit 35. And I'm wary now, just with how much time I'm spending in the water and out in the sun and in the wind. And it's been really nice now to build this routine of, you're talking about a ceremony, but it's almost like a little treat of, and it's going to sound maybe cheesy, but like you come out of the shower after a hard day of training. Sometimes you don't get a shower until you've had 3 back-to-back sessions and it's been 6 hours. So you're pretty gross at this point and you use a bit of body wash. But actually just being able to clean yourself up and use face scrub and the moisturizer, man, I've actually done a great job here, and you feel better for it. And so it's actually been this next element or this next evolution of how can I take better care of myself, not just nutritionally or mindset, being able to switch off, but it's almost like you rejuvenating yourself in the sense of it creates quite a positive feeling quite quickly, and it is a little celebration essentially and trying to build that into each of the days has become really nice. What would be the thing that you could achieve from here that you would sort of get your monkey off your back or feel that you've had a great career? The biggest one for me is the opportunity for us to race a world champs in our own country. For someone that's kind of missed the development in the sport of having a go at trying to go to the Olympics or do that style of racing, this is as close as I think it will feel or get for me to have a home Olympics. And a lot of people say, that's snap. But for us, it's pretty special to have a world champs at home across any sport. So that would be, it's not a monkey off the back, that's just this massive overarching goal for this year. And a lot of it's all targeted towards that. And, currently, and I'm hoping to stay the same, I'm really enjoying that process of the training and the sort of mental energy that's going into getting ready for that. Following that, it'll be interesting to see where I then take the sport from that. Like that's definitely, regardless of the result, that's not the end. I think there's still so much more that my body wants to give and what I mentally want to give as well. So that might come across as having a good crack at, I'd like at one point to win New Zealand Ironman champs. I mean, Cam Brown got to win 12. Just one would be nice. And there's still titles. There's still so many accolades or achievements. Just because you've won a race once, why not try and win it again? Or go faster, like Kathy Freeman. We don't really have world records per se. I mean, they talk about it, but courses are different and the weather changes. It's not really regulated in that sense, but it is always nice to have a personal best time, I suppose.
There's always legend status as well, right?
Of
There's
course,
always that race that somebody ran and everyone's like, wow,
that day was incredible. Totally. So there's definitely an element of that. And outside of that, I think I've got some other goals in running as well that I'd like to have a good crack at, and then sort of that marathon and half marathon distance.
Hey Jack, honestly, it's been really great to chat. There's absolutely no surprise that you're a champion with the mindset. It's been so refreshing to see this sort of and get to know and understand your mindset a little bit more. But hopefully that's one thing we can take away from this chat and others can get to see. But thanks for giving us your time and giving us your insights. But it's absolutely no surprise to me that you're doing well, and I really can't wait to see where it's going to go and just keep up the good work. It's sort of amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I've really enjoyed sort of the synergy that started here and the journey that kind of not only I'm on, but together. It's a pretty awesome time, really.
Well, we'll keep your skin looking good. That's the least we can do.
That's important. Yeah. Not only will mum and dad be stoked, but there'll be a few others. I look better on the podium that way as well. I'm not my wrinkly old man.
Oh no, you've been awesome. So fantastic. Awesome chat.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
Stay cool.